Hi, everybody. It's Laurie Rivers with you, and I am excited to present the how, what, and when about Saturn returns. Now, if you're new to my channel, I'm Laurie, also known as Astrologer. I've been an astrologer for 3 decades. I've been a professional astrologer since 1998, and I make it my business to explain astrology in ways that's easier to understand because it's a very complex subject and there's a lot of misinformation out there. So, today you're going to learn what that Saturn return is, why you don't need to really be afraid of it, and how to identify when it's your turn. And everybody gets a turn if they live long enough to get there. And we actually have multiple Saturn returns in a lifetime if we're lucky. So, should you be scared? Should you be worried about your Saturn return? Everybody makes Saturn out to be the big blue meanie. No, no, you don't. A lot of what people are talking about when they say, "Oh my god, it was the hardest year of my life." Well, there were other transits happening at the same time. The Saturn return is just a return from of Saturn to the place it was in your natal chart when you were born. Saturn represents a lot more than just struggle, okay? That's just a singular point of view. Saturn represents a lot of other things, including ambition, drive, and consequence. Now, consequences can be good too. So, first of all of the celestial bodies have returns. A planetary return happens when the planet returns to the exact degree and minute it is in the natal chart. Okay, and that's your birth chart. I'm using charts from astro.com because one, it's free, two, it's the easiest to read. These are the easiest charts to read. At the end of the presentation, I'll be showing a Saturn return chart, the divinatory chart using my Solar Fire software, which is a little fancier, not always easier to read though. The luminaries, the sun and the moon, the planets and calculation points like the north and south node of the moon all have returns. Asteroids do too. These are the end of one cycle, which is an orbit, okay, and the beginning of another. They do not indicate your doom. You have a solar return every single year, you have a lunar return every single month. These things are neither good nor bad. They indicate the theme of that particular cycle. So, to understand the timing, you need to understand how fast the planet moves. So, like I said, you get a solar return once a year. Okay. It does not last the entirety of the month in which you were born. Okay. The same goes for the moon. It doesn't last. That return is for a day. Okay. And in a moment in time when the moon returns to the place it was in your chart and the energy rings out for a month. Saturn returns are a very long, the return itself rings out energy over time, but the process itself, um, it's a singular day, but you'll feel it for some months preceding it. We're gonna talk about why in a minute. Saturn takes 29 years to orbit the sun astronomically, okay? Astrologically, it takes between 28 and 29 years. Because of retrogrades. All right. It's just retrogrades. All right. And a retrograde is an optical illusion. They don't really happen out in space. But from our geocentric point of view, from our perceptual lens, it appears that planets go backwards sometimes. And Saturn spends a good amount of time retrograde every single year, which is why it has a different time astrologically in its orbit than it does astronomically, because it's always moving forward. So this means Saturn can return to the place it is in your natal chart when you're 27 to 29 years old the first time. You're usually getting, it doesn't really happen on your 27th birthday. It would happen really close to turning 28, like weeks beforehand. And likewise at 29. It doesn't really happen when you're 30. I know people say that out there, but you're turning 30. So, like in my case, I was 29 and getting ready to turn 30 just a couple months later at that final return. Okay. Now, is it a challenging time sometimes? Yeah, because you're growing up, you're becoming an adult, you're facing adult responsibilities in a different way. And hopefully, you've mastered some of life. Mastery is a Saturn concept. And yeah, there's more than one. You can have up to 4 in a lifetime. You have to live to be exceptionally old because you wanna look at things like in 28-year, almost 29-year cycles. So, most people see at least 2, okay? Most people see at least 2. And so, in fact, I'm heading towards my 2nd Saturn return, and I know a lot of you are entering your 1st, and everybody has you freaked out, right? So let's find out how to find your Saturn in your natal chart because that's the first things first. Let's find out where your Saturn is. To do that, you need to know what the glyph looks like. It looks like an H with a little line through it, a little crosstalk there. So, using an astro.com chart, and again, I don't get any kickbacks from astro.com. I've just had an account there since the year they started, which was 96. So some of you are uh, are are approaching that time of your Saturn returns that were born that year. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, time goes fast. Speaking of Saturn, Saturn in time. So you want to find Saturn in the chart. It's the H with the crosstalk. The arrow in the slide is pointing to it. And then you want to look at the degrees and minutes. So this is 23 degrees of Virgo, 6 minutes. Okay, that little circle pointing things out. All right. Every sign has 30 degrees, and every degree has 60 minutes. And we can find those in the astro.com chart by like find the red arrows. They're pointing to the ends of the sign. Those are the edges of the sign. That first arrow to the right is pointing at 0 degrees of Virgo, and the arrow to the left is pointing to the 2959 mark, the end of Virgo. Okay. And those little tick marks represent 1 degree each. Okay. So you can count those tick marks. So a conjunction is when a planet is right on top of another planet, and a return is a conjunction. Okay, so a solar return, the sun is returning to the place it is in your natal chart. A Saturn return is where Saturn returns to the exact same space it is in the natal chart. And so a conjunction is a 0 degree aspect, a 0 degree angles are right on top of each other. All right. But you might be feeling stuff on the approach. Okay. And I use 8 degrees separation. Okay. 8 degrees separation. I know some people go out to 10, some people go out to 12. There's a reason that the people who follow me, and that's because I have very, very accurate predictions. I have a very, very high accuracy rate, and that's because I use something called tight orbs. I use very narrow windows of um, the distance between planets when I'm predicting. And it just accuracy is everything. I know the Hellenist argument is because the ancients didn't care about them as much, but that's because they didn't have the math to do so. If they had the math to do so, they would have cared. So this is pointing out if you look at the Saturn here, okay, if you look at the Saturn here, we and the red line. Okay, so we've got the not the red line, but the red arrows. So if you look at the bottom, that's about 8 degrees away from the 23 degree mark. Okay. And there's a black Saturn at that 8 degrees. This is when you'll start feeling the pressure. Okay. And until Saturn's at that exact degree. In my experience, by the time everything lines up and that circle is pointing to where they're actually lined up on the return, by the time that happens, you've kind of been through the bumpiest part of any transit if there's going to be bumps. So you might feel pressure building when Saturn is within 8 degrees of your natal Saturn. and is approaching the return. This is the part most people talk about being crunchy, guys. This is the time where things get a little bumpy because you're really having to come into your own as an adult. It could be frustrating, it can be difficult, it could be nerve-wracking because it's kind of think of it like finals, like you're ending practice adulthood in that first return. In the second return, so in your late 50s, it might be more like you're having to pay attention to things you were ignoring, like health wise. It could be you have to accept the fact that you're an elder. You're no longer a youth. You are now in a mentoring role or an executive role. And maybe you're teaching others. Maybe you're thinking about your mortality and what you're going to leave as a legacy. So it's different subjects as we gain maturity and we get older. But, if you weren't taking good care of yourself in the beginning, then you're probably going to run into some bumps at that second Saturn return. So, the approach stage is going to last several months, and it can happen more than once if Saturn goes retrograde after meeting up with your natal Saturn. Okay. So if you go to astroseek.com, they have a calculator for Saturn returns or other planetary returns, and they'll show maybe three charts for some people, not everyone. If there's those three charts, you choose the final one for the divinatory chart. Those other two charts are just showing where Saturn meets up. Now, those will be significant times, and you gain some self mastery or face some consequences. It's part of the process, but it's not the final return. And then it's really important that the time of the approach is understood that it can be stressful. It doesn't have to be stressful. This is often a time where people get married and have kids or get a divorce. You might have to move out of living on your own and move back with family and then get back on your feet again, or vice versa. You might leave your family for the first time and people might call you a late bloomer. It just depends on the individual and what's going on. It might be a time where your kids move back in if you're in your late 50s. Um, it isn't always the easiest ride, but it doesn't have to be this horrendously scary time. And as a young person heading into your first one, I know a lot of people are like, it's the Lord of Karma. Um, it is in the Vedic tradition, but in Western tropical astrology, we really shouldn't use terms like that. We really shouldn't. That's cultural appropriation. I like to use the term consequence. And sometimes we're facing consequences of hard work and dedication and study and putting in the time. And sometimes we face the consequences of decisions made in ignorance or naivety. And sometimes we face all of it at the same time. Nobody's perfect. We're not here in life to be perfect. So again, it's a time for coming into our own authority and understanding we've mastered certain aspects of self. So the upside of the process is that you can find and develop your inner authority. And of course, you're beginning a new cycle. So the Saturn return chart is divinatory. This is an example chart using my Solar Fire software. It's professional software. It shows the theme of the next Saturn cycle and where you'll find your challenges and gain authority through experience. Saturn is really all about the experience. It's like, well, that's great. You got a degree. Now, what are you going to do with it? Okay. In this chart, we have Saturn in the 11th house. And so that would be community action, gaining community under it's the Saturn is in Leo. So maybe it's learning how to lead, not putting yourself down, not dealing with imposter syndrome, that kind of thing. Each house has its own theme. Okay. So you don't read the Saturn return charts in the same way that you read a natal chart. Okay. And I actually have a class that is up on my snip feed link, and I'll link that in the description here. It's on sale. I keep it on sale because I want people to know about their Saturn returns and how to navigate them. And it's much more in depth than this walkthrough. If you join my Patreon, you get all of the guides for free, all of the astro guides. These are walkthroughs. These are like the first guide on the left is the ultimate cheat sheet. The second one is the guide to instinct and intuition, and the third guide is the guide to Chiron, just clearing up some misinformation on these celestial bodies and concepts, giving you a really great foundation. Plus, I teach classes and workshops, and patrons get all kinds of bennies when they join, including discounts for classes and readings and whatnot. So, if you want more astrology resources, you can go to my link. It's snipfeed.co astros Lori, or to book a reading or register for a workshop, and go ahead and use the YouTube discount at wokeastrology.com. Click readings and you'll find all the information there. I'm Laurie Rivers. I look forward to seeing you in my Patreon and in readings and on TikTok. Thank you very much.